He thought it was just another ordinary evening in his own neighborhood. But then, a knock at the door turned into a nightmare. Strangers in uniforms, men who weren't even real cops, demanded he leave his own home. Their reason? Not law, not justice, but the color of his skin. What started as harassment quickly escalated into something far darker, exposing the hidden power of racism where he least expected it. But what none of them knew was that help was already on the way. How far would this injustice go before the truth came crashing down? Marcus Johnson had built a quiet, steady life for himself. A Navy veteran turned small business owner, he worked hard, paid his dues, and cherished the home he'd bought with years of sacrifice. The house wasn't just walls and windows, it was proof of everything he had overcome. For Marcus, this neighborhood was supposed to be safe, a place where his daughter could ride her bike and where evenings ended with peace on the porch. But even in that peace, cracks had begun to show. The local HOA had a reputation strict, controlling, and not always fair. Marcus had heard whispers about neighbors being fined for the smallest things, the wrong paint color, a lawn too long, even the kind of people they invited over. He brushed it off, telling himself those were just stories, the kind that spread in every community. Still, there were moments that gnawed at him, a lingering stare when he walked his dog. A letter slipped under his door reminding him of community, standards, subtle things that didn't feel right, but not enough to imagine what was coming next. Marcus believed he had earned his place here, but late one evening, that illusion was about to shatter, because the people knocking on his door weren't neighbors and they weren't there for a friendly visit. The knock on Marcus's door wasn't gentle. It was hard, insistent, more like a demand than a request. When he opened it, two men stood there in what looked like uniforms. Their badges gleamed in the porch light, but something about them was off. Their shirts weren't crisp, their belts mismatched, and their eyes didn't hold authority, they held arrogance. "Sir, you're in violation of community rules," one of them barked. "You need to vacate the property immediately." Marcus blinked, stunned. Vacate? This was his home purchase fair and square, mortgage paid on time, papers in order. He asked to see the notice, the documentation, anything official. But instead of producing proof, the men leaned in closer, voices growing harsher. "You don't belong here. Pack your things, now." The words cut deeper than he expected. They weren't just about rules. They were about him, his skin, his presence, his right to live where he had worked so hard to be. A cold realization sank in. These weren't real cops. They were imposters, empowered not by law, but by hate. Marcus's daughter peeked from the hallway, confusion in her wide eyes. He quickly motioned her back, shielding her from the ugliness brewing on his porch. His heart pounded. He knew better than to argue, but he also knew surrender wasn't an option. This was his home. As minutes stretched, neighbors began to notice. Curtains shifted, lights flicked on, but no one came outside. No one stood up. It was easier to watch from behind glass than to confront what was happening in plain sight. The men grew louder, shoving a bogus paper into Marcus's hands full of legal-sounding jargon, but meaningless on closer look. He could feel the weight of their intent pressing on him. They wanted him gone. Tonight, Marcus's training told him to stay calm, to measure every word, but anger bubbled beneath the surface. Was this what his service meant? That he could risk? his life for freedom abroad, only to be told he didn't deserve a home in his own country. The tension spiked when one of the men stepped forward, close enough to shove him. Marcus's fists clenched, his body tensed. One wrong move, and the situation could spiral into violence. He thought of his daughter upstairs, her trust in him, her safety depending on his restraint. Then, in the distance, the low rumble of engines broke the silence. Headlights turned the corner, flooding the street with blinding beams. The two imposters stiffened, exchanging nervous glances. Something or someone was coming. Marcus didn't know it yet, but the night was about to take a turn no one on that street would ever forget. The roar of engines grew louder until 3 dark SUVs screeched to a halt in front of Marcus's house. The street, once silent, now pulsed with tension. The fake officers stiffened, their bravado faltering as the doors swung open. Out stepped men in combat gear, broad shoulders, disciplined posture, and an aura that could silence a crowd. Navy SEALs. For a split second, Marcus thought he was dreaming. These weren't neighbors, and they weren't here to watch. They were here for him. The imposters barked at them to leave, waving their fake badges as if they could intimidate trained warriors. But the SEALs didn't flinch. Their leaders stepped forward, voice steady and sharp, cutting through the night. Show your credentials, now. Silence, the kind of silence that burns hotter than words. Marcus's pulse hammered in his ears. His daughter's face flashed in the upstairs window, her small hands pressed against the glass. He had never felt so torn, caught between rage at the injustice and relief that someone finally was standing up. The fake officers doubled down, shouting about orders and violations. But their tone cracked, their hands shook. And the neighbors who had been hiding behind curtains, they were now stepping out, phones raised, recording everything. Marcus realized the balance had shifted. For once, the power wasn't in the hands of those who threatened him. It was in the eyes of witnesses and the strength of the men who had his back. And the truth that could no longer be silenced. Then came the breaking point. One imposter reached for his belt, fumbling for something metallic. The SEALs moved instantly, pinning him to the ground before Marcus could even breathe. The other dropped his badge, stumbling backward, his face pale with fear. For the first time that night, Marcus felt it, the weight lifting, the tide turning. But the question still lingered. Would this moment spark real change? Or would it be just another fight soon forgotten? The fake officers were taken away that night, exposed for who they truly were, nothing more than cowards hiding behind false authority. For Marcus, it should have been a moment of victory. His home was safe, his daughter unharmed, and justice, at least in that moment, had prevailed. But deep down, he knew the scars of the night would last longer than the headlines or the videos. Neighbors posted online. He had stared into the face of hatred, not from strangers in a far-off place, but from men standing on his own doorstep. It was a reminder that no matter how hard he worked, no matter how much he sacrificed, there were still those who believed his skin made him less worthy, and yet something powerful came from that night. Neighbors who once stayed silent began to speak out. People who hid behind curtains realized silence was no shield, because silence only protects the oppressor. The courage of a few exposed the truth for all, and Marcus's fight became more than just his own. The story isn't just about one man, one family, or one neighborhood. It's about a system where racism still thrives in shadows, waiting for moments to strike. It's about the strength it takes to stand tall when everything tries to push you down. So the question remains, how many more Marcuses will it take before change is more than just a reaction? How many more families must live with fear before equality becomes more than a promise? The answer is up to us. To speak, to act, to remember that silence is complicity. Because if injustice can knock on one man's door tonight, it could be any of ours tomorrow.